David comes on the scene and he sees this, and he sees that every time the enemy, the giant, would come out, it would just freak out the Israelite army. They were dismayed, and the Bible even uses this word. They were terrified by Goliath. And they were so terrified by his voice and so terrified by his presence that as soon as he would come out, they would run the opposite direction in great fear. So David steps on a battlefield that is surrounded not with faith, but is surrounded with fear. Okay? He steps into fear. Not only was he afraid, but Saul was afraid. If no one would go and fight the battle, you would think at least the king would go and fight the battle. And the king showed up at the battleground with his armor. He was there. He had everything necessary to fight the battle. How do we know that he had the armor? We know that he had the armor because when David gets ready to go out and fight the battle, Saul tried to dress him in his own armor. Instead of putting the armor on himself and going and fight the battle, he said, I don't think I'll wear this. Maybe you can wear it. Okay. So we got a bunch of chickens everywhere, okay? We got the Israelite army, they're running away, and Saul doesn't want to put his armor on. He's very glad to share it with David, but he doesn't want to wear it himself. And so David steps on the battlefield, and everything around him is fear. He's surrounded by fear, not by faith. And I would submit to you today that the world in which we live in, and the world that you live in most of your time, day in and day out, you're living in a world that is occupied by and surrounded by fear. Most people do not operate in faith. Most of our world operates in fear. It's the modus operandi of our world. Fear, 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 fear. Bad news, bad news, bad news. Terrible, terrible, terrible. All this stuff coming our way. And so if we're not careful, we can become like Israel's soldiers and run away from those things that we are afraid of. Or we might say, well, I've got the armor of God, but I'm not sure I'm willing to wear it. And so the question becomes, are we going to be strong in heart? And people who are strong in heart don't operate in fear, they operate in faith. God did not design you to operate on fear. In fact, the Bible says God doesn't give us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. The fuel of your life needs to be the fuel of faith, not the fuel of fear. Now, I want you to see how David handles this situation. Let me ask you again, what is he surrounded by? That was about half of you, maybe, okay. Generously, that was half of you, okay. I'm going to ask you again, what was he surrounded by? Fear. He's surrounded by fear, right? All around him. So as far as we know, he's the only person in that entire group that had any faith.